What happens when the most successful companies in the world leave their own local community behind? Last year, I worked on a project in Silicon Valley. This particular project, I was engaged with a client to help them build a community engagement plan. And as part of this project, I got to understand the landscape of the Silicon Valley region very well through research and through having many conversations with community members. The paradox of this particular region of Silicon Valley, where it's home to companies like Google and NVIDIA, some of the organizations that have tremendous influence on the world, on society, are located here. And the situation is such that people making $100,000 a year are considered low to moderate income in the Silicon Valley region. The income to not be considered low to moderate income here is $109,000 a year or more. And the average home price is nearly $2 million for a very small square footage home. The dynamic that has been created by these companies is such that the average worker, those who are not employed in the tech industry, really do actually struggle to make a living and to make ends meet here. As part of this project, I talked to many people in the community, some who had lived in the Silicon Valley region long before Google and some of these other large companies made their headquarters here. They described a much quieter community, a place that felt like a neighborhood, or a place that felt like a home that somebody would live long term. And then these companies came in and had tremendous demand for skilled workers. So they brought people in from all over the world without there being a strong plan to build housing for the ones already living there. These companies had influence on their neighbors, on the people living in their own backyard, yet they had global influence. The disconnect was that some of these companies were not very engaged civically. In conversations that I had with local community leaders, many were able to state the type of influence and the type of impact that these large, significant organizations had locally. Community leaders said things like, "This one isn't very engaged," or "This one pulled back when the political administration changed and shifted their priorities." Another said, "Our low-income students that go to school here don't see a career path in Silicon Valley, even though it's in their own backyard. They can see it with their eyes, but they don't imagine a future working for some of these large tech companies." As a result of some of the disconnect between what these companies were doing philanthropically and what they were doing locally, the tremendous corporate growth actually created unprecedented challenges for their neighbors, for the people living in their own community. And they have global impact. So it does make sense that their philanthropic programs and their giving efforts and their impact efforts are centered on a much larger area. And yet the effect that these companies have on their local footprint makes a big difference for the people living there who want to live a healthy, strong quality of life. But how did we get to a place in which companies are not as concerned about what happens locally as they are globally, or not as concerned about what happens in their own footprint? A lot of it does have to do with the digital time and place that we live in. We're currently now in the advent of artificial intelligence, which is driving so many things. But even thinking back pre-artificial intelligence to the way the internet and e-commerce changed society. Although we had many means of communication before then, e-commerce really created a circumstance in which business leaders no longer had to be as civically engaged as they once did. There was a time in our society in which if you wanted to grow your business, you had to have a stake in your community. Being present was good for your business because people knew you and people want to do business with the people that they like. So we moved into an era in which businesses are not as connected to their local communities and local regions as they once were. When you're serving clients all over the globe or a specific population with a specific need that is geographically dispersed and not locally connected, it can be easy to overlook the physical place that either your company or your organization is in. It's only natural to focus your attention and efforts where you feel like business is going and growing. The digital era can disconnect business from place. It's why we see some of these big Silicon Valley companies that I just referenced doing more of their giving efforts or more of their philanthropic efforts in places that they aren't located, in places where their headquarters are not, because there is that disconnect. They're having a global impact, and so their philanthropy has a global impact as well. But it's important to remember that the places that we are connected to really make a difference to our circumstances. That's what community engagement is all about. Not just being connected to the community that you're serving, but the community or the place that your business or organization is operating within. We see a sense of this in society still in some of the conversations that we hear at a national level, requiring people who make large sums of money, millionaires and billionaires, to pay their fair share, or more pressure on politicians for corporate giving strategies. There's a sense that people feel like companies should be positively influencing the places where they're located and headquartered, that citizens, that the people living in the places, shouldn't be shouldering the burdens of the changes that companies bring to locations. And most companies do have community engagement strategies. Community engagement, however, looks a bit different than marketing, and sometimes community engagement is not as effective as it could be because it's put under a marketing bucket instead of truly being community engagement. The real distinction with community engagement is the mindset or the philosophical approach with which the organization approaches the work. There is a lot of commonality and a lot of similarity between marketing and community engagement, but they're not entirely the same. In fact, sometimes companies just simply have too many touch points in the work that they're doing. They're trying a bit of anything and everything. And sometimes that is a result of not going and talking to or having conversations with other stakeholders in the community first before launching some of those external outreach efforts. But right now, I want to walk you through some of the distinctions between marketing and community engagement. Both are important. Organizations need marketing for sustainability, but community engagement is much more effective when it is done with community engagement as the end goal rather than brand or business reputation. This slide here outlines some of the distinctions between marketing and community engagement. So marketing designs for a target segment, then spreads the message. So marketing starts with the product or the service in mind, and then determines ways to communicate with the people that they think are the right fit for that product and service after the fact. It's about letting people know that your organization is there or exists. Community engagement is about listening first. It's kind of like market research for civic participation. In a sense, as I said, there are some similarities. Community engagement starts with listening first and then building the program or the structure around the community feedback. Marketing selects causes that aligns with its brand visibility and product or service. And to be very clear, that is important. Focus in efforts is important. If you are a tech company spending your time with philanthropic efforts around animal care or animal shelters doesn't align with your brand. And so that might not be the community engagement effort that you want to launch in. There should be some alignment there. But the difference with community engagement is that the community engagement approach develops based around what the community identifies as the needs or challenges. It doesn't reverse engineer it. It says, here's what we understand the community says that they want, and then let's develop around this. Marketing tends to announce decisions after they're made. It's a communication function, whereas community engagement will invite input prior to decision making. And that does not mean that every decision is going to perfectly align with what a community says they want or need. Every business, yours included, has its own constraints. However, you are, in this approach, inviting participation in the decision-making process and sometimes coming up with solutions that you would not otherwise have on your own as an organization. Marketing efforts tend to measure impressions, likes, shares, sentiment scores, and other analytics, whereas community engagement is truly focused on measuring depth of relationship and trust. Those core things that can't be measured by dashboards. It's based on relationships, the hard, messy stuff of life. Marketing will be focused on organizing visible events, putting things together to develop brand awareness. There's a time and a place for that. And there's a time and a place for organizing events in community engagement as well. But the distinction here is that community engagement invites long-term partnerships, not just one-off events. A common complaint you'll hear from community stakeholders about certain companies is that they can tell they're just a check-the-box checklist item, that the company's showing up at a particular event, but there's no real sustainable relationship beyond that particular event. And then finally, marketing's goal. And again, marketing is a good thing and has its place. It positions the organization to the community or to the ideal client profile, whereas community engagement holds the organization accountable to the community. It's a two-way street in which the organization understands that it's intertwined with the community that it's working in, invites participation, and tries to be a good neighbor and a good corporate citizen in the location that it's in. And all this is true for remote companies too, because even as a remote company, you still have employees who are in distinct physical locations and impacting the places that they're in. Remember, I talked about all of those tech workers. None of those tech workers specifically were coming in trying to do community harm, but their presence drove up housing prices and drove up demand for the Silicon Valley region, and so had an impact on the community, whether intended or not. In a true community engagement strategy, companies will work with the community to design plans and programs that take into account the concerns of the neighbors and the concerns of the geographic location that they are in. Community engagement is simple but hard at the same time. The concepts around community engagement are simple, but the principles of relationship building and long-term civic engagement and civic leadership take work. That work is important though. That work sets your organization up for success and sets society up for success as well. A strong community engagement plan can drive brand reputation in very strong ways. A good community engagement plan can build a talent pipeline as your organization has a reputation of one being desirable to work for. A good community engagement strategy means that you're a company that is named as one that's aligned with serving the community and being locally connected and present when community leaders talk about you. It gives you the social license to operate in that community. It can make strategic decisions easier when you have community buy-in because you have trust from the community in advance. Community engagement is not just a nice to have. Community engagement shapes the society that we live in, and it's risk management. It helps you build plans and programs that help your business be sustainable over the long run. We live in an era in which the interdependence between business and place is less visible than it used to be 20 or 30 years ago, but it still exists. The question is, will your company be one that stands up as a good citizen and a good partner to those in its location? If you'd like to check and assess where you stand, there's a link below this video to a free assessment that I offer to organizations to help them understand their starting point. Like and subscribe so that I can continue making this content for you. Together, we can build strong communities by being business leaders that operate with trust and mutual accountability. Thanks for watching.